I'm going to call the Boston Region MPO's UPWP committee meeting to order. So start off reading the virtual meeting guidelines here. So all participants are joining the meeting with muted microphones. If you haven't already, please rename yourself to include your first, last name, and your affiliation. All participants can mute and unmute yourselves. And to participate in the discussion, you can select the raise hand function. It's either under the participants button at the bottom of the screen and at the bottom of that menu, or the reactions button that's in the toolbar. And I'll call on folks as I see raised hands. And if you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, you can contact Kate White via the chat box at her email at kwhite@ctps.org or on the phone at 857-702-3658. And just as a heads up, this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. And if you have any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in the meeting, you can contact Kate White at kwhite@ctps.org or at 857-702-3658. All right, so we'll get started with the roll call introductions here. So I'm Ben Muller with the MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning and chair of the committee. And I will call on folks by their affiliation here. We have MAPC.
Good morning. This is Eric Barrasso with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Town of Arlington. BPDA. Don't see anybody there. BTD. Okay. City of Framingham.
Erica Jerem, City of Framingham, on behalf of Mayor Spicer.
Thanks, Erica. Town of Medway. City of Newton.
Good morning, David Koza, City of Newton.
Town of Norwood.
Hi, Tom O'Rourke, Town of Norwood, representing Trick.
City of Somerville.
Good morning, Brad Rawson, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Joe Curtatone and the Inner Core Committee.
Thanks, Brad. And the RTAC.
Leonard Diggins, Advisory Council.
All right, thanks, Len. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda here, public comments. Are there any members of the public who'd like to comment before the UPWP committee? You can just use the raise hand function, either under reactions or in the participants menu, or dial *9 if you're on the phone. Okay. Not seeing anybody. If you have any written comments, you can provide a copy to staff by emailing Sandy Johnston at sjohnston@ctps.org. I think we can move to agenda item 3. This is the draft FFY 2022 UPWP. Sandy?
All right, thank you, Ben. Yeah, so I am just going to throw a link in the chat, and that is the link to the PDF of the UPWP that I will be asking for your approval to recommend to the MPO that they release for public comment. I think this has been extensively discussed at this committee, so I don't want to go over too many details. But basically what I'm asking you today is to recommend to the MPO that at their 10 o'clock meeting, the full board release this document for a 30-day public comment period. Couple of headline items, just so in case you haven't all looked over the document extensively. This UPWP program is about $5.5 million in federal funding, which is about $4.6 million for CTPS, another $1 million for MAPC. In addition, it programs about $1.6 million in contract work that CTPS is doing for other agencies and other entities. The headline number is going to be about $7.3 million. We've been over the list of discrete studies in this committee multiple times. I would be happy to discuss further if anyone wants, but I'm not going to talk over it too extensively. A couple of other items in the rest of the document, as has been mentioned before, there's a new task in chapter 3 in the certification requirements section, which is called MPO Resiliency Program. You might remember this started as an idea for a discrete study, but we're allocating a small amount of money for what's intended to become a permanent program to allow staff to coordinate with partner agencies on resiliency topics, do some research, and eventually build a larger MPO resiliency practice should the MPO choose that as a priority. And that's on page 3-50 of the draft document, or that's page 104 of the PDF. And also Appendix A looks a little bit different this year. That one documents transportation-related studies that are going on around the Boston region in FFY 2022, but are not funded by the MPO. And as we discussed earlier, this year's version of the appendix covers only the essential elements required for this appendix by our federal partners, which is federally funded studies and those of regional significance, because it had proven very difficult to collect information on other studies going on in each and every municipality. We're still hoping when we have time, resources, and are getting sufficient submissions and data collection from our municipal partners to kind of build an online interface that would be available to the public that would document all of that. So unless I'm happy to take any further questions, but at this point, I would like to request that this committee vote to recommend that the MPO release this document for public comment.
Thank you, Sandy. Any questions or comments or follow-up for Sandy? All right, not seeing any. Can we get a motion and a second to recommend advancing this to the MPO board for release for public comment? Eric Brasso?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Eric. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thanks.
Second.
Can you say your name for the record? Sorry, I didn't catch.
Tom O'Rourke, I'll second
Oh,
that.
great, thanks. And are there any follow-up comments, questions, discussion while we're here? Steve Olino?
Yes, Steve Olinoff, Trick Alternate. Well, I'm rather disappointed in what's happening here because we had a large discussion last time on this matter, and we dropped a number of things, and the amount of money went down, and I suggested alternates that actually could do something, and yet in the end there no one made any move to do anything and just going ahead accepting this as though nothing happened. I think it's about time people step forward and follow through on our discussions and what's been said and take appropriate action. We're not even having any further discussion on this.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Len?
Well, to Steve's point, I feel that we just didn't have time to really pursue anything meaningful, Steve. And I'm speaking through you, the chair, but I care about what happened. And I think the staff made it clear that they are going to be open to more discussion about the process and the studies. And so I have every confidence that they will do that, and the advisory council will invite them to those conversations. And so as a member of the advisory council, Steve, I invite you to ask for me conversations with them on the agenda so that you're satisfied with what happens, or at least with the conversation, and so that we can advance things forward for the next cycle. Democracy and process is slow, but we will persist, and we'll get what we want, or we'll find out that what we want maybe isn't the best thing. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Eric?
All right, Steve, are you talking just to understand what your frustration is about? Are you talking specifically about the conversation we had about the congestion pricing study?
Right, that was one of the main items that was discussed last time. Yeah.
Okay.
And I hope we can move forward and it's going for a comment period. I hope it'd be a true comment period. There was a discussion, so there is something for people to comment on. I hope the comments come in, and we can have and those will be really considered for once. I mean, too often we put something out for a comment and, you know, it goes out, we get comments and we just nod our heads, oh yeah, okay, sure. And then go right ahead and vote. I mean, this organization shouldn't, you know, members of the MPO shouldn't be there to rubber stamp everything, and you know, should be real discussion and come to real conclusions.
Got it.
I did have two notes, I guess. One relatively minor, just the table E1 in the PDF version needs a little update, I think. I think it has the original slate of discrete studies. And then sort of closer to this topic, I was looking through the long range transportation plan task description that starts on 321. And I know there's the item for scenario planning under that. And we had discussed potentially including a sentence more specifically noting that congestion pricing will be sort of considered or looked at under that task. I don't know if that's something that staff intend to move forward on during the public comment period, or if that's something that is more implied.
Yeah, at this point, our intent has been to consolidate all changes to the document from this draft in the final draft after the public comment period, incorporating all public comments. We can certainly change table E1 at this point in time. That's just deleting a couple of comments. I did also want to mention that we're, you know, as we discussed with the committee at the previous meeting, we do have every intention of coming back with like a really defined and detailed scope of work relating to what we're doing, defining what work staff are doing relating to congestion pricing through other budget lines at some point, probably in the fall. And I know Marty Milkovich is here and he's going to be working on that. So you will be hearing about the work that is happening on that topic, even if it's not being given the study, you know, being given the name of a discrete study, and you'll have the chance to comment on it and help us define that that scope of work.
Lynn?
Yeah. So once again, to Steve's comment about the comment period. So the comment period ends in a month. I mean, is there really any changes that could be made, I mean, after that comment period in order to adhere to the deadlines?
I mean, from our perspective in the Office of Transportation Planning, I think there's time to make changes based on the comment period.
All right, you know, so all right, as long as it, and I guess it would be helpful if we could define or the timeline from that, I mean, so that we would know how to schedule our time, I mean, and to maybe plan for meetings if necessary. So as to make Steve and the public realize that it is that we not only listen to the comments, but if necessary, we can make changes. Because otherwise, what I would say is we're hearing your comments and we'll take them into account for the next cycle. I mean, so the public is aware of the fact that we can't really change this document because of time constraints, but we will take what we hear from you and apply it to what we do to the next UPW. And it's like, as long as we are straightforward with the public, people won't get so frustrated. So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know once the comment period wraps up, I'll have a sit down sort of with staff and look at, you know, what's the volume of the comments, what's the bulk of the comments, what's actionable now, what makes sense to work on. So we can schedule additional meetings if we need to talk over that. Are there any other discussion on this? Eric?
Ben, I don't know if you can tell, but Brad Rawson is just kind of physically raising his hand. I just wanted to call Brad out if he
Oh,
doesn't
sure.
have
Yeah, I
the
can't
reaction
quite
button. Yeah.
see everybody here. Go ahead, Brad.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Eric. Forgive the elementary use of the Zoom tool and the inability to find the digital hand. Tom Bent sends his regards. He's on vacation, and forgive the elementary question if this is something that Tom had discussed. But to Steve's question, in the larger kind of context, I would like to ask, just for our own follow-up and edification of stakeholders, is that example of road pricing challenge related to resource constraints, Ben, or is that a policy decision? And I could just use kind of a 30-second catch up from the committee's discussions to date so I can follow up effectively with Tom and others.
Sure. So it's sort of a mix of the two, depending on, I suppose where you sit in the discourse. Largely, there was some discussion as to the scale of the proposal. There was some concern about the budget. It was initially included in the recommended tasks, but then the budget for the discrete tasks got smaller than we expected, so it was cut at that point. And then there were some concerns from MassDOT primarily about the relationship of the study to CDPS's and the MPO's sort of core work. So I think that's sort of it's very similar to conversations that have happened in previous years. I don't think there was that much new that came up through it, but happy to let others from the committee as well fill in any blanks I left. And David?
Well, to Steve's point, I think we had a good conversation about congestion pricing, several conversations. Obviously there's a lot of interest in it, and I think we discussed it and we made a decision, and I think we decided it's not exactly the right time right now. I think we'll wait and see sort of what happens with congestion over the next year. I think I end up with a lot of very good projects to look forward to. I actually think next year might be more appropriate anyway. So I think we all did our jobs just fine, and I'm happy with the list of projects, and I'm happy to move forward with it.
And looks like Sandy also linked the YouTube recording in the chat here, since the meeting summary hasn't been posted online yet. It is a full hour though, so pour yourself a glass of wine, I suppose. Any other questions or comments on this action item? All right, seeing none, and we have the motion and the second on the floor to recommend advancing this to the MPO for a release to public comment. So I'll go down the roll here. MAPC?
Eric Boreasa, yes.
All right, now switch to names again. Sorry, bad habit. Erica Jerem? Guidelines 2.1
Yes.
level AA standards and revised section 508 standards. City of Newton?
David Kozis, yes.
Town of Norwood?
Town of Norwood, yes.
City of Somerville?
Brad Rawson, yes.
And Artec.
Hunter Jenkins, yes.
And just realized midway through I switched back to towns again. So I'll pick one of these and be consistent next time, I think. So I think we move forward to agenda item 4. This is MAPC's use of UPWP funds. I know Eric sent out something to committee members over the past week. I'll pass the floor to him.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't know if many of you have had a chance to look at I think it's chapter 7 of the UPWP, but it kind of lays out the MAPC portion of the UPWP. I did get a few emails from folks, mostly just supportive of the work. The main kind of body of work falls into planning and technical studies. For many years now, we've been doing a lot of work in the parking area, really trying to research, understand the impacts of parking, how to help our cities and towns better manage parking. That saw a little bit of a decrease during the pandemic, I think, because not as many people were out traveling, but now we're getting more interest in parking management issues and parking studies and how to incorporate the right amount of parking into planning, particularly understanding like what's the right amount of parking needed for new commercial developments. Like lab space is a big question we've been getting as cities and towns are grappling with more lab development. Like what do you need for that type of land use? So there's a body of work to look into some of that. We're going to support the MBTA with the Better Bus project and the bus network redesign, which I think many of you participated in core committee meeting that talked about the TEAS initiative there. We're particularly interested in looking at the priority bus corridors that the MBTA will put out and the help that MAPC could provide in understanding, again, sort of how we could rededicate street space, whether it's parking or other things for dedicated bus priority. We do a lot with our subregions on sort of sub-area studies or sub-regional studies, looking at like first last mile connections to transit and other things. That's something we've had a lot of interest from over the years. We continue to hear interest in that. So that's another body of work. And then sort of under our kind of alternative mode planning, which focuses a lot on our bicycle sort of pedestrian planning. We've gotten a lot of demand over the past year for support for municipal-wide bicycle and pedestrian plans. We're doing a bike plan in the town of Milton right now and in the town of Wakefield. We've had we've heard interest from numerous other communities. We are, continuing to play a role with the regional bike share system and Blue Bikes and help planning for the future of Blue Bikes. And then also planning our regional trail network is a big part of what we do. And then finally, under this area, we also are working on trying to help the state plan for zero emission vehicle technology. So we actually just did a body of work for the Executive Office of Energy and Environment Affairs, looking at how to encourage TNCs, Uber and Lyft vehicles, and even taxi vehicles to become electric, and what are the needs there for those vehicles, everything from charging infrastructure to what's the right amount of subsidy. I think the state is interested in providing a special additional subsidy for these vehicles, which on average drive 3-4 times as many miles as sort of your regular car. And so we've been doing a lot of research into that area as well. So that's kind of encompasses a lot of that work. And happy to take questions on this or anything else that's in the UPWP for MAPC.
Thanks, Eric. Any questions for Eric on the MAPC's tasks in the UPWP? Okay, not seeing any. I do want to, I recommend if you haven't read through chapter 7 to read through. There's a lot of very interesting and meaty little tasks in there, accomplishing a lot. So thank you very much for that. Okay. Next agenda item, we have members' items. Are there any other sort of updates or comments from MPO members? All right, seeing none, I think we can jump to the next meeting here. So currently scheduled next meeting for August 5th. I believe that's before the MPO meeting, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, and that's going to be to facilitate an amendment to the current UPWP, current FFY 2021 UPWP, which will incorporate some budget changes both from CTPS and from MAPC. And pursuant to the previous conversation about potential changes to the final document, I would just urge folks to get your comments in by that meeting, if possible, so that we can talk about them if necessary, because that'll give us a little bit more time to hold to the schedule as currently laid out to endorse the final UPWP on August 19th.
Great, thanks, Sandy. All right, so I think that wraps up our business for the day. Can I get a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn. Leonard Diggins, RTAC.
And Eric?
Second that motion, Eric Barassa, MAPC.
Great, thanks. So barring objection, we are adjourned. Have a good 30 minutes.
Thanks, everybody.